What's up? What's up? What's up? Welcome to another math video for all you rock stars out there. Guess what? Today we're going to talk about negative exponents with base 10. So, I'm hoping you guys are excited about this. I'm excited about this. Kind of a tricky concept, but once you get a hold of it, I think you'll be rocking and rolling. You know, I was thinking about rocking and rolling, and I was also thinking about people who are rock climbers. And I was wondering, what do you think a mountain climber's favorite type of book is? One with cliffhangers. Cliffhangers? Let's go. That wasn't cheesy at all. I loved it. All right, today we're going to talk about exponents, like I said, negative exponents. So you're going to understand the powers of 10 with negative exponents by examining the patterns, and then represent a power of 10 with a negative number in fraction as well as decimal form. So not only are we going to understand how negative exponents work, we're going to be able to represent their equivalency through fractions and decimal form. Okay, first we got to start with a little vocabulary. Negative exponent, okay? So I want you to look at negative exponent there and what it's going to show. So when we think of a regular exponent, right, we think of a regular exponent and we think of like 3 squared, okay? And what that means is the amount of times that 3 is multiplied by itself, which would be 2 times. That's what the exponent tells us, okay? So when we're thinking about negative exponents, what we're talking about is it shows the number of times 1 is divided by the base, okay? And that'll make a little bit more sense once we get going. But a number having a negative exponent, okay, so let me show you what that looks like. 3 to the negative second. So the exponent up here is negative 2, okay? And it is a negative. And so the number having a negative exponent equals its reciprocal with a positive exponent. You may not know what reciprocal means, so that's going to be our next vocabulary word. Vocabulary word of, like I just mentioned, is going to be reciprocal. Okay, reciprocal is, whenever you hear the word reciprocal, what you're thinking of, the reciprocal of a number is 1 divided by that same number. So basically, the way I think of it is, so when I think of 2, we're just going to flip it over. The reciprocal of 2 is 1 divided by 2. So you just take that number and put 1 above it. Okay, so the reciprocal of 10 is 1 over 10. Because if we think about what 2 really is, as a fraction, it's 2 over 1. And when we flip it over, it's 1 over 2. And that would be the reciprocal, okay? So take time to make sure you understand what reciprocal means because you're going to need that going forward. All right, so let's take a look at a negative exponent, all right? So negative exponents for the powers of 10 are used to represent numbers between 0 and 1. Okay, it's very important that you understand anytime a number has a negative exponent, the answer is going to fall. So if we have a number line, the answer is going to fall somewhere between 0 and 1. It's going to be in this region. Okay, negative exponents get us into the somewhere between 0 and 1. Because remember we said we're dividing by the 1 by the number. So it's just going to keep getting smaller and smaller, but it won't pass 0. Okay. So let's look at our first one. Oh, one more thing. They do not make answers negative. Let me say that again. They do not make answers negative. What? They don't make answers negative? No, they do not make answers negative. I need you to... I know. They don't make answers negative. They do not make answers negative. Someone's going to put that down as our answer as it's negative. And all of these people are telling me it does not make the answers negative. For example, let's take a look at this now. If we have 10 to the negative third, okay, all that means is we're taking the reciprocal of 10, which is 1/10, and now we're putting it to the third power. Okay, so reciprocal, take the 10, turn it, the negative exponent, the negative means take the reciprocal, so we turn it into 1/10, and now we have 1/10 to the third. 1/10 to the third, what does that mean? Well, it means we take 1 stays by itself because we're not taking it to the third, but we're taking this 10 on the bottom of our fraction and using it 3 times because that's what the exponent told us to do. So the next step would be we multiply those bottoms together. 1 times or 10 times 10 times 10. Okay, 10 times 10 is 100, times another 10 is 1,000, and we get that. And finally, we take that 1/1000th and we think about place value. So we have zero, we have right here, this would be tenths, hundredths, thousandths, right? So 1/1000th, that's where we put the 1. And now we have 0.001. So that's how you break it down. You take the whole thing kind of takes place from the idea of, first thing we do is take the reciprocal, 1/10, and we put it to the third because it was already to the negative third. Then we take that 10 and we multiply it by itself 3 times. 10 times 10 times 10. Then we actually do that multiplication. 10 times 10 times 10 equals 1,000. We keep the 1. And then that's our fraction representation. So 1/1000th is our fraction representation. And then 0.001, or 1/1000th, if we speak in decimal terms, is our decimal representation. So let's look for some patterns. Okay, so when we looked at base 10, and we're just using positive exponents, you may have noticed something. 10 to the first, which just means 1/10. Okay, 10 to the second was 10 times 10, and that gave us 100. 10 to the third was 10 times 10 times 10, and that gave us 1,000. 10 to the fourth, 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, and that gave us 10,000. So I think you're seeing the pattern here. And if you remember when you first got into base 10 with exponents, what you realize is that exponent actually, a lot of students have told me this over the years, that exponent actually just tells us how many zeros to put after the 1. So if you look at all those and you look at the exponent, for example, this bottom one is 10 to the 6th. How many zeros do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's the pattern we're looking for with positive integers. You think there's one with negative integers? Well, let's take a look. Okay. So when we have 10 to the negative 1 right here, we just flip it over reciprocal, and that gives us 1 over 10 to the 1. What is 10 to the 1 equal? It's equal to 10. This is the easiest of the exponents. So what that would give us our fraction, and then simplify that fraction, and we get 1/10. And we take that and we put it into words. 1/10 is the same thing as saying is 1/10. And the reason we do it like this is because it helps you figure out where the decimal is going to go. 1/10 right here, same thing, 1/10. Where does the 1 go? Well, remember we have decimal, we have place value. This first one right of the decimal is 10th, so 1/10 would be 0.1. Okay, so we're looking for patterns, right? Now we got 10 to the second, 10 to the negative second. 10 to the negative second tells us that we're going to take the reciprocal first, and we're going to take negative second, or 10, and flip it over to 1/10. That's what the negative does for us. And we're going to take the 10 now on the bottom and multiply by itself twice. 10 times 10. What's 10 times 10? 10 times 10 is 100. This is a fraction. How do we say that fraction? 1/100th. That's how we say it in words. 1/100th. That helps us tell us where the decimal is going to go. The first place is tenths. The second place is hundredths. That's where our 1 goes. So now we have 1/100th. Okay, now we're looking for patterns, right? We're looking for patterns. Let's go to the next one. 10 to the negative third. Reciprocal. Turn it over to 1/10. We did that. Keep the 3. Keep the exponent as 3. That tells us we multiply 10 times 10 times 10. What is 10 times 10 times 10? 10 times 10 is 100. Multiply by 10 again and you get 1,000. How do we say this fraction? 1/1000th. 1,000th. That tells us how to do the decimal. Now this 1 is going to go here, and it would be 0, 0, 1, because this is tenths, hundredths, thousandths. Okay? And then finally, we go down here. This pattern just keeps going and going, but let's look at the final row, and we see that we had 10 to the negative 4. Flip it over. 1 to the 10th to the 4th. That's the reciprocal. What does it 10 to the 4th look like? 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. Multiply those together, and you get 10,000. What's our fraction say? 1 over 10,000, or 1/10,000th. That's our words. That 1 right there is going to go here, because this is tenths, tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths. And that's how we know, and that's how we know where that 1 goes. So there's your pattern. Okay, when we did the other way, when we were looking at the other way, this number gave us 2 zeros. That was kind of our pattern and our trick we were looking at. And this exponent here gave us 4 zeros. Well, let's go back to this next one and see what it looks like. This number here gives us 2 zeros on the bottom, but it only gives us 1 here because on the one side of the place value, we have a ones place. This is a ones place. On the other side of the place value, we do not have a ones place, so you have 1 less 0. So when you're doing negative exponents, the way I always think about it is, once I turn it into a decimal, it's 1 less 0 than the exponent tells us. So if this is 10 to the negative 4th, I'm going to use 3 zeros. 10 to the negative 3rd, I'm going to use 2 zeros. 10 to the negative 2, I'm going to use 1 0. Seeing the pattern? Pretty cool, huh? Okay, so now let's take what we know and fill out this chart. So let's take the top row. See if you can think about what are we going to put in here on the top row based on our exponential form saying 10 to the negative 2 or 10 to the negative 2nd. Well, what's the first thing we do? Okay, we go ahead and flip it over as a reciprocal. So 10 is 1/10. Okay, but how many 10s do we have? We have 2 of them. So we're going to multiply that by itself. Let me get out of highlighter mode here real quick and do that again with the pen. Okay, and we're going to say 1 over 10 times 10. Okay, that's expanded form. What's fraction form look like? Well, the 1 stays by itself up top. And what's 10 times 10? 10 times 10 is 100. Okay, 1/100th. Say that in word form, 1/100th. So when we write this out, we put 0 down as our ones because we don't have a 1. We put the decimal point. We say, do we have a 10th? No. Do we have a 100th? Yes, we have 1 of them. And that's where our 1 would go. But also remember that pattern you found on the last one. 10 to the negative 2 means 1 less 0 after the decimal point. Okay? So now they're giving us expanded form. What do we think this is going to be over here on this side? So we have, in the next row, we have 1/10 times 1/10 times 1/10 times 1/10. So how many 10s do we have there? We have 4. So we know our exponent is going to be 4. But we're going to have to reverse it, reciprocal it back up, right? So this is going to be 10 to the 4th. But it's going to be the negative 4th, right? 10 to the 4th, it's going to be negative because we're trying to flip it back over. Now we can go forward like we were before. We have 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. Remember that pattern we found a couple slides back when we were multiplying by 10? If we're multiplying 4 10s together, how many zeros are we going to have? Well, we're going to have 4 zeros. That's the bottom. And the top stays the same. 1/10,000th. See how I just said that? 1/10,000th. Here's our ones. Let's go tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths. That's how we know where the 1 goes. Got to know your place value. Okay? Let's do one more. And what we have here is we have 1/1000th. Well, let's go ahead and do the decimal because we already said the words 1/1000th. No, nothing's in the 1 place. 1/1000th. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths. Right? Okay? And now we're going to go backwards. So now we have 1/1000th. How many tenths did we multiply together to get 1/1000th? Well, we did 3 of them. How do we know that? Because remember the pattern you said? The 3 zeros gives us how many 10s we multiply together? Well, here's the 3 10s. And now we got it 1 step further backwards. Let's reciprocal that. 10 to the 3rd, but we flipped it over to get from fraction back to a regular number. So it's going to be 10 to the negative 3rd. Okay? Not too shabby, guys. Not too shabby at all. Okay. Now what we want to do is identify everything in these boxes that represents 10 to the negative 4th. Go ahead and try that. And now let's break it down. Okay? 10 to the negative 4th. Well, let's look at this one right here. We have 1. Well, actually, let's just go ahead and do the reciprocal. So we got 10 to the negative 4th, which means we're going to flip it over, right? So let's go ahead and flip it over. That was the first step we did on every one of those problems. And we keep the 4th. Okay, that doesn't look very good because of I wrote it too big. So let me get rid of that 4. And let me try that again. Okay, 1/10 to the 4th. That was the first step. Well, I see one of those already, right? We already see one of those up here. 1/10 to the 4th. So that worked. Now what are we going to do? Well, now we're going to say, let's take this 1/10 to the 4th and expand it. So we keep the 1 up top. And how many of these 10s did we do? 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. Okay? Is that up there in our picture? Nope, that's not up there. So let's go ahead and take it into fraction form. We keep the 1 on the top. And what is 10 times 10 times 10 times 10? Well, remember the pattern. How many zeros do you see? 4. So let's do 1, 0, whoops, 0. I'm at the bottom of my screen and I'm struggling to write this. There we go. 1 over 10,000. Okay, because it's 1/10,000th. Do you see that anywhere up there? Yes, you do. Okay. What about decimal form? Let's say this number right here. Let's say it. Right here, that is 1/10,000th. Okay? 1/10,000th. So let's go ahead and write that down as a decimal. 1/10,000th. Let's go back to what we talked about. Let's go ahead and put, how many holes do we have in 1/10,000th? We don't have any. So that's our holes. Then we put a decimal. And then let's go place value wise. 1/10,000th. Well, this is tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths. 0, 0, 0, 1. Because that is the 10,000th place. So where do we see that up there? Right here. And also remember that when you have 1/10,000th, it's 1 less 0. Remember that pattern you found? So 1/10,000th is the 1 at the end with 3 zeros in front of it instead of the 4. Okay, you're just not going to use that 4th one. Now let's see if there's anything else up here we missed. This would be too small, right? So that doesn't work. 4,000. That's when people take this 10 to the negative 4. And when you get someone who would get 4,000 would go, they would take this 4 and think it had something to do with the problem. Okay, they would flip it over and then they would multiply it by 4. And it's just the 4, all it is telling us how many times to multiply the 10 by itself. Okay, so that does not work. Here's another one with a 4. This is 10,000. Okay, on this one, all they did was say 10 to the negative 4, and they just did 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. Okay, they forgot the reciprocal property. So that does not work. And this one, oh, here, what? It's not a negative. It's never negative. Oh, they did not listen. Sometimes people don't listen to the negative vibes. Okay, so it's not that one. Okay, I think you guys are getting it. I think you're getting it. These guys stop yelling at me as soon as you guys get it. Okay, let's write the fraction and decimal form of 10 to the negative third. Go ahead and give it a shot. What is the fraction and decimal form of 10 to the negative third? All right, 10 to the negative third. What's the first thing we do? What'd you say? Reciprocal. That's a really good idea, dude. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's flip her over. Okay, but what are we going to do with that 3? Yep, you're right. Multiply the bottom 3 times. 10 times 10 times 10. That's our expanded form. So how do we get to fraction form? Well, 1 stays by itself because nothing's happening up there. And the bottom, we're multiplying 10 times 10 times 10. Well, anytime you multiply a bunch of 10s together, all you got to do is put a 1, and look how many zeros are up there. 1, 2, 3. So that's going to give us 1,000. Now let's say this is words. 1/1000th, because we got to get the decimal form. Here's our whole. Here's our tenths, hundredths, thousandths. And those 2 spaces get zeros. It's that easy, y'all. I know you can do it. Pretty good stuff, guys. So remember, there's no negative negative exponents do not make negative numbers. All their answers are going to be somewhere between 0 and 1, and no negative numbers. And there's always a 1. Did you notice every answer was a 1? Somewhere in the answer was a 1. There was no 5, 7, 8. It was always 1/10,000th, 1/100,000th. The decimal was 0.001 or 0.1 or 0.00001. 1 is always in the answer. Okay? I think you guys can do this. I think you got it. But while you're thinking about it, I want you to go ahead and think about this. What washes up on itty-bitty beaches? What washes up on itty-bitty beaches? Waves. I mean, microwaves, itty-bitty. See you later, rock stars.